Okay, so let's begin. This is your introduction to the Gilded Age. So to begin with, what is the Gilded Age? So it's really the era known as the post-Reconstruction era, which is after the Civil War, all right? It's from 1877 to 1900. And the term the Gilded Age was actually coined by this mustached man over here named Mark Twain. I'm sure you're familiar with him. And just to let you know, gilded literally means covered in a thin layer of gold. So when Mark Twain coined this age as the Gilded Age, it was basically a layer of prosperity covered over poverty and corruption. So once again, it was a layer of prosperity or, wealth, economic boom, whatever you want to say, covered by poverty and corruption, all right? So it was basically a bad time that made itself look good through economic boom. All right, so with every type of economy within history, so on and so forth, there's always winners and losers, right? So let's start with the winners. So who prospered during the Gilded Age? And there's really three groups that really prospered. One are industrialists, right? Secondly, politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, as well as businessmen. So yes, could businessmen be industrialists and could politicians be businessmen? I guess so. But just want you to focus on those three different groups. All right, and now on to the quote-unquote losers of the Gilded Age. Who really suffered under the Gilded Age? Who was underneath that layer of prosperity, all right? And so I like to coin the term average Joe citizen. Or basically, AKA you and me, basically. So these people were immigrants, they were day laborers, night laborers, whatever you want to call it, and farmers, all right? So these were basically the workers of the nation. And these were the ones who really suffered. All right, so how do these men prosper? Specifically, though, we're talking about industrialists and businessmen, all right? So how did these two groups prosper? Well, during the Gilded Age, the government used something called a laissez-faire approach. Or in other words, French meaning a hands-off approach. So basically the government had a very limited role in business and in people's everyday lives. Basically the philosophy with laissez-faire was that, you know what? Government stays out, all right, and let businesses basically do battle with one another. So in the end, as you can see the last bullet there, is the strongest businesses will survive. So the government allowed people to fail and other businesses to prosper, all right? And what resulted from this was quite troublesome, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Okay, so what resulted, right? Not the board game Monopoly, sorry, but a monopoly or monopolies, right? So when the government has no say and just lets businesses run wild, well, what happened is certain companies became stronger than other companies, right? So as you can see here, definition of monopoly, and this is just my definition, just a general definition, it's exclusive control of a service or industry, right? So during the Gilded Age and a little bit after, there was a corporation, you might have heard of before, U.S. Steel. This was the biggest manufacturer of steel in the United States, and it crushed all the other competition. So with this came some specific, maybe rights, if you will, that they had. Because they were the only steel corporation, they can now say how much they could sell for each foot of steel, let's say, how much they were willing to buy from other manufacturers to create steel, so on and so forth. So they really dictated the market. So when one company controls one item, they can basically put a price tag on whatever they want. So it's quite troublesome for, let's say, us, the consumer, right? All right, so now we already went over how businessmen and how industrialists prosper. So let's focus in on how politicians prospered during this age. So basically, and you can see here, subsidies, which were payments made by the government to encourage the development of businesses. So we wanted businesses to prosper. That's fine. That's all well and good. When businesses prosper, the economy prospers. But what happens is that businesses then gave friendly politicians money for the support. So when people, politicians, won places in office, they promised businesses that they would give them subsidies. In return, businesses would bribe politicians and give them money. And as you can see in the bottom, it's kind of like, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. All right? It was basically a very, very corrupt way to do business. And it was going on constantly, even before the Gilded Age, but especially leading up to it and within it. They also benefited politicians through the spoil system, and it's kind of crazy the way they make it sound. So look, it says politicians hire their friends for positions, right? So, I have a lot of friends. Perhaps you have a lot of friends, all right? So I wouldn't hire my friend to be a fellow teacher with me if he or she didn't know anything about teaching. It doesn't make any sense. But in the spoil system, what happened was it was a bunch of friends, all right, that got these high positions, but they were completely unqualified. And basically what this led to was just corruption. So a lot of people started, not trusting politicians. And we still see these issues today for different reasons, but we still see these issues today. All right, last but not least, reforming the spoil system. Obviously, you can't have your friends running office, right? Our country would be in ruins if the spoil system was not taken out. So what happened was the Pendleton Act, or AKA the Civil Service Reform, was created by a President Chester Arthur, which we'll talk more about tomorrow. And basically, with this act in place, it made government jobs awarded on merit, or experience, if you will, not on just who you know. Now, that's arguable, all right? Sometimes you can get a job depending on who you know. But this act made it clear that it's what you know, it's your experience, it's your value that gets you a government job, not who you know, quite simply put. So this is basically your first video, your first introduction into flipping, all right, and the Gilded Age.